Hey class, in this video I'm going to be talking about drawing using logic. So we'll use some of the concepts that we covered in the last video on conditional logic to change the way the user can interact with our meme project. Let's get started. I'm going to open up the GitHub desktop app, make sure I'm on my MMP 210 repository, and click Fetch Origin to make sure I'm up to date. Now I'm going to click Open in Sublime Text. In the last video, I already created a new folder and copied over my index.html as well as my images, the lizard and the cat. And I created my sketch.js. Last time I did some examples. This time I'm actually going to add some image and text to the screen to show how to create my interactive meme. To start, I just have a basic setup and draw. So I'm going to go to Tools, Start Sublime Server, and open a new Chrome window and go to localhost 8080 and choose MMP 210. I haven't added this project to my portfolio links yet, so I'm just going to type in meme version 2 or v2 into the browser bar. There's my canvas. I'm going to open up the console, so that's ready to go. And now I can start to add some new content to my project. I might increase the vertical size of my canvas here, since memes and logos both tend to be square. So if you're working on a meme or a logo, usually you'll have like a square image. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I'm going to do that for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and review loading in my images, so I'll have those ready to use. So I have two images. I have the lizard image and I have my cat image. We can use these or other images, however many you want, or you can just use one image if you can do your meme with one image. So I'm going to say variable lizard image, comma, cat image. You may have seen the syntax before. If not, when I'm declaring my variables, if I'm not assigning them right away, I can just use a comma in between the variables so that I don't have to write two lines. Now I'm going to preload my images. So I'm going to say function preload. And I'll just say lizard image equals load image. And I have to use quotation marks here because it's a path. And so my lizard image is just a path to lizard.jpg. Remember to check the capitalization and spelling of both the file name and the extension name so that you don't get those crossed up. And let's load the cat image. So now we have our images loaded and they're ready to draw. So something that we can do very simply with our meme to make it interactive is use a condition with our mouse pressed. So we'll be combining a conditional with our mouseIsPressed variable to switch between the two images. So we can say if mouseIsPressed, then draw the lizard image. So I'll draw image, lizard image at 0, 0. Else, draw the cat image. So one thing that could be a little confusing here is that if mouse is pressed means that I have to be clicking the mouse. So even though I see the lizard image first in my code, what I'm actually going to see on the screen when I load the page is the cat image. And it's not until I click the mouse pressed that I'll see the lizard image. See, I'm getting an error, cannot read property width of undefined. Let's see. And I can see here that I misspelled cat image, so that was just a little typo. That would have been kind of hard to find because we were getting the error here. But I just looked at all of the instances of the variable cat image and I saw that it was misspelled there. So let's try that again. So now with that code, we can see that when I click the mouse, it changes to the lizard image. And when I'm not clicking the mouse, we see the cat image. So let's review our images real quick because obviously we can see that the images don't appear on the screen in the way that we would expect them to. So let's try moving them around a bit. So the cat image fills the whole screen, so we can just move it a bit. So we want to move it over a little bit, like maybe -100 on X, maybe 150. Okay, and we might want to move it up just a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. But the lizard image, we can see there's this black part at the bottom, so the image isn't quite big enough to fill the sketch. So we could either make the image bigger or make the sketch smaller. I can look to see what are the dimensions of the image by going back to the Finder. So if I go to GitHub and go to Show in Finder, that's one way to do it. I can also do that from Sublime. I can go to my lizard and go to Open with Finder, and there we see the lizard. Or I can just open a new Finder window and find my project and look at the lizard here. So we can see the dimensions here. If you're on a Windows, you might not be able to see this, but you can probably go to Properties and go to Description, or you can open it in an image editing program. So here we see the dimensions are 1024 by 630, so it's a little bit smaller than our sketch window. So let's just make our sketch window a bit smaller. So I'm just gonna go to 600, so it's a nice even number. So a little bit smaller. So then we can kind of recenter our cat a bit. So let's make this like -100 and move this back a bit more, maybe -180. And then we can center our image. So we'll do like -100 on X for the lizard. And we might need to go even more and even more. There we go. So now we can toggle between the lizard and the cat. And then we can add other stuff inside of our if statement if we want to, continue building on what we have with our images. So we can also use some text. And remember in the last video, we looked at how to use text. And one thing that we did was we added the Roboto Mono font from Google Fonts. So I'm going to use that. So in setup, I'm going to set my text align to center. So that'll make it easier for me to align my text. And then I'm going to change the text font to Roboto Mono. And I'm going to change the text size a bit to 100. So if I want to make other changes to the text from individual instances of the text, I can do that here. But by adding these in setup, that means I only have to do it once. I don't have to repeat it a bunch of times. So if I'm not going to change these values, it's better to do it in setup. So I'll put some text on top of my lizard and cat. So here's where you could, add some funny caption or, some information or whatever you think would be relevant. So I'm just going to say I'm a cat as kind of a placeholder. And I'm going to put this in the middle of the screen. And then for my lizard, I'll do the same thing. Text, I'm a lizard. So that text is a little bit too big. Let's make that a bit smaller. Maybe like 75. And it's a little hard to read, so maybe we can choose a different fill. Maybe try a white fill. And I could put this before each text if I want to change the fill. So maybe for the cat, I'll do something kind of yellow, like 255, 255, 0. And maybe for the lizard, I'll do something bluish to match the lizard color. It's a little lighter blue. So let's bring in a bit of orange, a bit of red and green to lighten up that blue a bit. That's looking a little on the purple side, but it looks kind of good. I'll put a little more blue in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Whatever colors you want to use there, fine. And so now we can start to play with adding different captions or doing different things. So this is a very simple if statement, conditional statement. If the mouse is pressed, we're going to show one image. Else, we're going to show another image. And so we can just create a very simple meme where the user interacts with what we see on the screen. We may want to add in some instructions for the user, because right now you don't really know that you can click. So I could do that as P5 text, or I could put that as some HTML. So I could have a paragraph and say click to reveal. So now our user knows they can click to reveal another image. So that's a very simple format. If we wanted to make something more complicated, we could think about dividing up the screen space. So I'm going to make another example for this one. I'm going to leave this one the way it is. So I'm just going to rename this one 2-1. And I'm going to duplicate it and make another one. So you only have to do one version of this assignment, but since I'm doing multiple different ideas, I just want to leave them intact. So I'm going to do version 2-2. I'm going to close these out, and here's 2-2. And I'll just add in version 2-1 to the first one. So in version 2-2, I'm going to make something using the horizontal space. So I'm going to make sure to update this URL here. And then I'm going to delete what I've got so far. And so here, I'm going to use the horizontal space instead of the vertical space. So I'm going to make this a little bit wider. So let's do 600 by 400 instead. I might change that in a bit, but I'm going to do 3 copies of the image with 3 different texts over each one. So this time I'll use my cat image. I'll say image, cat image, 0, 0. And so I'm going to want the cat image to be a bit smaller to fit 3 of them across. And I'm going to crop it a little bit as well. So to get that width, I'm just going to divide the width of the canvas by 3. So I'm going to say variable w for width equals width of the whole canvas divided by 3. And so I'm going to make this cat image fit the width. And then I'm going to adjust the height to correspond with the height of the canvas. So it's a little bit distorted here. So there's a couple ways I can fix this. One is to increase the size of the canvas. So maybe let's try like 800. That looks a little bit better. Maybe we can try 900. And maybe we can make this even smaller. So it still looks a little bit distorted, but at least it looks a little bit better there. So I can kind of adjust the image, not just by moving the X and Y position, but actually changing the size of the image. So then I'm going to copy this image and just move it across. So the first one is at 0. And if I look at my canvas, the whole width of this canvas is the value width. And this value is width divided by 3, width divided 3, which I assigned to the variable w. And so if we want to know where to put our next image, we know that this is 0. And if we add w to 0, that'll put us here. If we add w to that value, that'll put us here. So just like we did with our stoplight in the other example, I can just move this cat image over by w. Now we have 2 cat images. And I can move the next cat image over by 2w. So that looks much better. Our cat does look a bit distorted because we're shrinking it down a lot. So if you start to see that level of distortion, one thing that you might want to do is just crop the image using an image editor. If you have Photoshop, that's a good way to do it, but you can do it pretty easily. On Mac, there's the preview program. I can go in here and choose a marquee tool and choose the part of the image that I want to crop. And one thing that I can do is hold Shift to force it to be a rectangle, and then get the part of the image that I want to do, and then click crop. So besides just editing the image in P5, I can also edit the original image if I want something that fits my design better. This is also very large. The space here is only 300 by 300 pixels. So I can now resize the image to be 300 by 300. And so now the distortion will be less obvious. So let's save this. This will be cat 300 by 300. And I want to make sure, I'm going to double check. There we go. So that's cat 300 by 300. For some reason, the original is now 300 by 300 and cat is just cat. But that's okay. As long as I have my original there, I'll just leave that and call that JPEG. So I'm going to rename this original, and then I have the other one is cat, and since it already has cat.jpg, I don't have to change the name in the code. But this is just a reminder that you can edit the images. You don't have to just use the image the way that they appeared. And so now I have the cat a little bit zoomed in, and I don't have to worry about the width and height anymore because I changed the width and the height to match my sketch. Okay, so now we have the cat image. I'm not going to show or reveal the cat image, but what I am going to show is different text based on where you are in the scene. And so that's where our conditional ladder is going to come. So I'm going to say if mouse is pressed, and then inside here I'm going to use a nested conditional to test where the mouse is. So I'm going to say if mouse X is less than W. So remember that W is equal to width over 3. So if mouse X is less than W, we know that it'll be somewhere in between width, which is here, and 0, which is here. So we'll be over this first cat. So if the mouse is pressed, and if mouse X is less than W, I'm going to draw some text. So I'll say text, and I'll say hello. And I'm going to try to put this in the middle of that first box. So I'm going to say W over 2. Since I know this first box is W, and if I want to put it in the middle, I have to divide by 2. You can also just use numbers here. If you don't want to use the variables and do math, you can use numbers here and just move them around until you get the right one. And then for height, I'm just going to do height over 2. So hopefully that will be in the right place. There we go. So it says hello. And let's get our yellow fill back. So I'll say fill is 255, 255, 0. Hello. So that looks pretty good. Let's move to the next one. So if this statement isn't true, then we'll continue. We won't draw what's in here. We'll go on to the next statement. So else if, and we want to use an else if here because we have 3 possibilities, not just 2. Else if mouse X is less than W times 2. You could also do W plus W if you wanted. So what that tells us, if this part is false, that means we know we're not inside here because that part would be false. So then we go to the next condition, and it's saying if we're less than this line. So that way we know that we're somewhere in between W and W times 2. So if that's the case, I'm going to use the same fill here. So I'm going to stick with the yellow fill. So I'm actually going to move this up here since I'm not changing the fill. And I'm going to put a comment so we know this is yellow for text. So if I'm applying the same fill each time, I don't need the fill to be part of my conditional ladder because it's going to apply to the text no matter what text is being drawn. So that way I don't have to repeat the fill. So I'm going to say for hello, I'm going to say I'm a... So I'm not really spending a lot of time thinking about something clever to write here, but you guys should spend a little bit more time on this in order to come up with something that is funny or interesting or whatever it is that you want to express with this project. And so then for the X value for the text, we need to do a little bit of math. So let's see. For our first one, we were drawing it W over 2. Okay, we know this is W, this distance here. This is W over 2 in the middle, and we want to go to the middle of this one. So we know that W over 2, to get to the middle of the next one, we just add W. And then we'll do it again for our third text. Again, you could just do this with numbers if you want to just move it around until you get it right. But using variables, we can use math to get it very accurate. So W plus W over 2. And I'll stick with height over 2 to center the text. So now we have hello, I'm a... That doesn't quite fit inside that box, so we could adjust the text size here. So I can say text size and make it a little smaller. Notice now that the first box gets smaller, right? Because we set the text size to 50, but then we never reset the text size to 75 because we're in the draw loop. And so once we set this text size, we keep going through the draw function, but we're never going back to the setup function. So now that we're changing text sizes, I need to grab that text size and put it in front of my first. So now I have hello, I'm a, and then for my last one, so I don't have to do the math here because there's only 3 possibilities and I've already tested for 1 and 2. So now I'm just going to add in the last possibility, text cat. And so I'm going to use the same x, but I'm just going to multiply w times 2. So this now is w times 2 plus width divided by 2. And so the way I got that, again, is just starting at 0 over here. We have w. So that's w times 2. And then we want to go half into this one. That's w divided by 2. So we have w times 2 plus w divided by 2. And that's how we get to our x value here. And then the same y value, height divided by 2. So hello, I'm a cat. And we can make the cat bigger. So we can put the text size down here to make it 75 again. And we could also change the color or do other things as well. So I have one more example using conditionals. So I'm going to make another project and then go to that one. Keep in mind when you're using these variables and different stuff, it's also totally fine just to use numbers here. I'm using variables because it makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to think about as much about like what the actual width is. I just divide width by 3 and then set everything based on that. But feel free to use numbers and just do the math yourself if you prefer. All right, so that's my meme version 2-2. I'm going to make one more example. Again, you guys only have to do one of these, but I'm just giving you a few different examples of things that you could do. You don't have to do it exactly the way I'm doing it. So for this one, I'm going to actually duplicate version 1 so I don't recreate that image again. So I'm going to duplicate that and call this -3. So I'm going to close this and go to version 3 and open sketch.js. And I'm just going to delete this again. I'll leave the text because I probably want to use that. And this is version 2-3. So in this case, we saw one meme that's just one image and then you change the image. We saw another where you have 3 images in a row and you reveal the text. For this one, I'm going to have 4 different quadrants and I'm going to show a different image there and then update what I see there if I'm hovering over that quadrant. So first I want to divide up my different quadrants using images. And so the way that I can do that, so I'm going to go to version 2-3. Okay, so let's first just draw images in each of the 4 quadrants. And I can stick with my lizard image or my cat image, or I could add a few more images. Whatever you want to do here is fine. So for my first quadrant, I'm going to say image. I'm going to use the lizard image for this one since I used the cat image last time. So I'm going to say lizard image 0, 0, and then width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. So that's going to give me an image up there. It's a little distorted, so what we could do is instead of using a square, we could go back to more of a rectangular. Okay, that looks a little bit closer, so that's 800 by 600. And so that one was pretty easy to derive. I just used 0, 0 as the origin point for the image, and then width over 2 is the width of the image, and height over 2 is the height of the image. So that's pretty easy to get that quadrant. So then for the next one, we're going to have to add width over 2 and keep y the same. So let's try that. So I'm going to copy this. And the width and the height are going to stay the same because each quadrant has an equal width and height. So for the x value, I just have to move over width over 2. And so now I have lizards in 2 quadrants. So I had width over 2, And so I just move that far over, and now I have width over 2 as the x value and the width. So it's really just a number. I can use it for whatever I want to use it for. So then we know that we have to do the same thing on the bottom. Let's put a comment here that says image in each quadrant. So we can start at 0, 0, and now we have to move down height over 2 to move halfway down the canvas. So we're going to do 0 for x and then height over 2 for y. Okay, now we have our third image. And I'm going to switch things up. For the last image, I'll do the cat. And so on this one, I'm going to have to move width over 2 on x and height over 2 on y. So I'll do another image, cat image, width divided by 2 for the x value, height divided by 2 for the y value. Then again, width over 2 for the actual width of the image, and height over 2 for the height of the image. So I'm using these same values, but for both width and XY positioning. So now I have my little quadrant, and now I want to reveal different text as I move the mouse around. So again, we're going to use a nested if statement. If mouse is pressed, then we'll reveal the different pieces of text. But now, to know which quadrant we're in, we're going to have to actually know two pieces of information. Let's imagine for a second that our mouse is right here. So to know that our mouse is here and not over here or over here or over here, there's two things that we have to know. One is that we have to know that the x value of the mouse is less than this line here, okay, which we know is width over 2. And we know that the y value of the mouse is less than this line over here. It has to be above here and to the left of here. So we know that y is less than height over 2. So then from there, it's pretty easy to figure out the rest of the quadrants. So for this quadrant, x has to be greater than width over 2. Okay, x has to be to the right or greater than this value. And y still has to be less than height over 2 because y has to be up here. So y is less than height over 2. Down here, for our bottom left quadrant, okay, x is still less than width over 2. So it matches that one. Y now is greater than height over 2. So we flipped to the other side of this middle line for the y. And so then the last one, we just take the x from the top, x is greater than width over 2, and we take the y from down here. Y is greater than height over 2. So basically we have, our 4 different quadrants, and each of them has 2 separate conditions. And we're going to continue building on this as we look at new ways to do interaction with JavaScript. For this one, we might not have that many actual uses for this, but hopefully what we'll be doing is reinforcing how to use these values as we learn how to make more complex conditions. So remember, to add 2 conditions together, I need to use a compound conditional. So for our first quadrant, I'll just put or actually let's refer to this as the top left quadrant. So we need 2 conditions here. So if mouse x is less than width over 2, and so I use the compound ampersand conditional, mouse y is less than height over 2. And so that's going to be on top of our lizard. So let's put some text there. We'll say lizard. And I want that to be in the middle of that top left quadrant. And so at this point, I'm starting to realize I keep using width over 2 and height over 2 over and over and over again. So maybe I should make some variables for this. So let's make a couple variables. So I'll use w to represent width over 2, half the width. And I'll use h to represent half the height. And I could put these variables in our setup, but for now I'm just going to leave them here. So now anytime I have width over 2, I can replace that with w, replace that with height. W, w, h. And so you can see that using variables does make our code a little bit easier to read as long as we understand what these variables stand for. So even our conditional now is just using W and H instead of width over 2, height over 2. And then the X and Y position for our first piece of text can just be W divided by 2. So we're going to be in the middle of this quadrant here. So that's W divided by 2 and H divided by 2. There's our lizard. And let's keep forgetting about the yellow fill. I want to keep that intact. Okay, so we have a lizard. So then we go to our next quadrant. And so if it's not in this quadrant, we can test if it's in another quadrant. So we can use else if here. And if I want to keep using my comments, it's totally fine to break this up. So this is going to be the top right quadrant. If you're not using comments there, you can also just put it right after the curly bracket. So this is the same. So this one, we flip to the other side of X. So mouse X is now greater than width. And mouse Y is still less than H. And so now we're going to draw the lizard again. This time we just want to move the width. So we just want to move from W over 2 to W plus W over 2. So we can just add W here. So we have lizard and lizard. Down here, nothing happens because we haven't written those yet. So we've just got 2 left. So we have the bottom left quadrant, else if. So now the mouse X is like the first one, okay, because we're on the left. So I'll just paste that in there. And our mouse Y is new because we haven't gone to the bottom yet. So mouse Y is greater than H. Okay, so then in this case, we're going to be using the text from here, but we're going to be moving down height. So we'll add that to the Y value. Height over 2 plus H gives us down here. So we have lizard, lizard, lizard. And then for our last one, we have a cat. And this is for the bottom right quadrant. And since we know it's not any of the 1, 2, 3 top quadrants, we can just put else here and we know it'll be there. But you could imagine wanting to do this in, some portion of the canvas that isn't actually the whole canvas. So if that was the case, we still would have to test against this. So let's do that. So let's say in this case, mouse X is greater than width and mouse Y is greater than height. So that puts us in the bottom right quadrant. So for the last one, we're going to copy that lizard text, change this to cat. And then we're going to move over both on the X. So we're going to go over width on the X and height on the Y. So now we have lizard, 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 cat. So pretty simple, not very interesting text, but just demonstrating how you can put different text in these different places. You don't just have to put text. You could also, change the image, add circles or rectangles or any other P5 elements. And you can also really do anything you want here. Like just because I'm clicking over here doesn't necessarily mean that this has to be showing a lizard or something that corresponds here. I could click here and show something different over here as well. I'm just matching this part to this part. So if I did want to change the text in all 4 each time, I could use the same text and just say, something else down here. And so now we have lizard up here and something else down there. So just because I'm clicking here doesn't mean I only can draw text here. I can also change other parts of what's going on. So if I wanted to, just have it, draw a bunch of different texts each time, I could do that as well. So I just showed a few different examples, but keep an open mind as far as, having different ideas and trying to execute those ideas. So you don't have to copy something exactly the way I did it. I'm just trying to show a few different ways that you can approach this thing. But what I want you to do is think about like the interaction or the experience that you want the user to have, and then figure out how to apply that using the conditionals. You don't necessarily just have to copy an example that I made and then, change things around. So those are the 3 examples. I'm going to figure out how to add in those links to the portfolio. So I need a thumbnail first. I'll grab one from here. So I'm just going to save. This is meme version 2. Since I have 3 folders, I really only need to put that in one. So let me open up my downloads folder, and I'll just put that in version 2-1. So I don't really need multiple copies of that. And so let's go to our home page. And so I'm going to add meme version 2, but I'm actually going to have 3 links there. So I'll have one portfolio entry for this, but I'll have 3 different links. So I'm just going to copy this project. And so this is meme version 2-1. And the name of this file is v2. Okay, so there's the thumbnail. And then I have 2-1 for meme version, let's say 2-1. And then I'm just going to copy this a couple times since I have a couple different ways of approaching this. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now I can see the anchor tag. If I want to fix that real quick, I can just do that with a style. So if I don't want to do all of my anchor tags this way, but if I'm in a project, okay, so I have font size, and let's just turn on display is block, so they're not, there we go. So now I have meme version 2-1. I have 2-2, and I have 2-3. So again, you only have to do one. I'm just giving a few different examples to kind of go through different ways of approaching it. So that's everything I want to show in this video. There's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. There's a lot of different ideas that you could do here. So maybe look at some different memes, or if you're looking at a logo, you can look at different templates. There's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. Like a good example might be like the Galaxy Brain meme, where you can see this is a pretty good example. This one obviously isn't interactive, but it does use a similar thing where it's dividing the canvas into a bunch of different parts. So you could create your own version of this using an interactive version where you click on the different brains. So there's a lot of different examples of memes that use different parts of the canvas or parts of the layout. And if you're doing a logo, you could do something where, you just change the text to make kind of a cool interactive logo, or you could do something like this where you have like maybe 3 different attributes that you want to express with the logo, or something like this where you can reveal, different components. So either way that you're working on it, try to come up with something creative and interactive, and think about how it might exist in some other context. Like if it was on, your logo on your website could be an interactive logo. That might be kind of fun. So think about different ways that you could apply these things in a creative context. So I'm just going to go ahead and upload these. So I'm going to close out here. You can see I added a whole bunch of stuff in GitHub. So I'm going to say adds meme interactive examples and commit to master and push to the origin. And again, remember to actually view your project before you submit it online on GitHub, because especially when we're working with images, if you have spelling mistakes, there are a lot of cases where you might see things that don't exactly work. So you do want to make sure to go to your actual GitHub pages project online and just make sure these things work. So you can see now I'm at my actual GitHub, not my local version, and just make sure everything is working. Mainly just the images, because if you spelled something wrong with the images, they may work locally, but they might not work online. So just double check that, and if everything looks good, then you're done and you can just submit your project. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions. You can email me or message me on Discord, or I'll see you in class.